Right now, as you watch this, something inside your skull is moving. Blood is rushing toward the parts of your brain, doing the work of understanding these words. Your brain, at this moment, is slightly heavier than it was a minute ago. You cannot feel it. You will never feel it. For almost all of human history, no one even suspected it was happening. In a laboratory in northern Italy in the year 1882, one man built a machine to prove it, a machine that could weigh a thought. His name was Angelo Mosso, and the story of what he built and how the world forgot it for over a century is one of the strangest in the history of medicine. This is the story of the first attempt to see a human thought from the outside, to catch the mind in the act of thinking, and it begins, as so many dark stories in medicine do, with a hole in someone's head. Before antibiotics, before modern surgery, a certain kind of patient occasionally survives something that should have killed them: a wound to the skull, a surgical removal of bone, an injury that left a permanent opening, and beneath it, the living brain, exposed but intact. These patients were extraordinary. Through that opening, you could see the surface of a working human brain, not in a corpse, not in an animal, in a living, talking, thinking person. A professor of physiology in Turin studied several of them, and he noticed something that no one had ever properly recorded. When the patient was calm, the exposed brain pulsed gently with each heartbeat, but the moment the patient began to think, to do arithmetic, to be spoken to feel a sudden emotion, the brain visibly surged. It rose. It pulsed harder. Blood was rushing in. One case became famous in his notes, a patient whose brain stayed quiet until the bells of a nearby church rang out the hour. The sound made the patient suddenly remember to say a prayer, and at that exact instant, the moment of a remembered thought, the brain pulsed upward. Mosso had watched a thought arrive and seen the body answer it with blood. This was the insight that would consume the rest of his life. Thinking is not weightless. Thinking is physical. The mind makes a demand, and the body pays it in blood. But there was a problem. You cannot build a science on a handful of injured patients with holes in their skulls. Mosso needed to measure this in ordinary people, in intact, healthy human beings. He needed to see the blood move in a brain he could not see at all. His solution was so simple and so strange that it has the quality of a dream. If blood rushes to the brain during thought, then the head for a moment becomes heavier. And if the head becomes heavier, then a person, balanced perfectly, should tip. So Mosso built a balance, not a small scale, a human one. A long, rigid platform, like a narrow bed, suspended at its exact center on a fulcrum. A seesaw built for a single human being. A volunteer would lie down upon it, perfectly still. Mosso would adjust the counterweights until the body floated in flawless equilibrium. Head and feet in perfect balance, the platform level, motionless, holding its breath. And then he would ask them to think. He would hand them a book, a page of difficult philosophy, a problem in mathematics, and he would watch the balance as the mind engaged. As blood shifted toward the working brain, the platform would slowly, silently tilt down toward the head, He called it the human circulation balance, and the readings he claimed to take from it were remarkable. A page of dense philosophy tipped the balance further than a page of a newspaper. Harder thinking, more blood, more weight. The effort of the mind had become something you could measure on a scale. And then came the detail that lifts this story out of the laboratory and into something darker and more human. Mosso tested emotion. He gave a subject a letter from an angry creditor, a demand for money the person could not easily pay, and the moment they read it, the moment dread and shame flooded in. Mosso wrote that the balance fell all at once, not gently, all at once. Fear, it turned out, was heavy. Now we have to be honest here, the way Mosso himself tried to be, because a machine like this raises 100 objections, and Mosso knew it. When you think hard, you might tense your muscles. You might shift your weight without realizing. Your breathing changes. Your heart rate changes. Any of these could tip a finely balanced platform, and none of them would have anything to do with blood in the brain. Mosso understood these problems with surprising sophistication. He worried about what we would now call the signal-to-noise ratio, the difficulty of separating the tiny, true effect from the enormous interference around it. He tried to record breathing and pulse at the same time, so he could account for them. He designed his experiments to repeat, to control, to isolate the variable he cared about. In other words, a physiologist in 1882, with brass instruments and ink drum recorders and candlelight, was already wrestling with the exact problems that would define brain imaging 100 years later. He was asking the right questions. He simply did not have the tools to answer them. And here the story takes its cruelest turn, because being right too early is its own kind of failure. The famous American psychologist William James mentioned Mosso's work briefly in 1890 in his great textbook of psychology. He described the delicately balanced table that could tip toward the head, and then the world largely moved on. The balance was difficult to use. The readings were hard to reproduce. Photography of the brain did not yet exist. The technology to truly test Mosso's idea was decades, generations away. And so his great machine, his attempt to weigh a thought, slipped quietly out of medicine's memory. The public, briefly, went the other way and believed too much. A French newspaper announced that the balance would soon explain the entire physiology of the brain and even cure mental illness. It would do none of those things. The hype faded. The disappointment followed, and Mosso's name faded with it. Angelo Mosso died in 1910. His manuscripts, the detailed records of his experiments, his diagrams, his careful notes on the weight of thought, were placed in the archives of an Italian university. And there they sat for more than 100 years, gathering dust, unread. The man who first tried to see a thought had been almost completely forgotten. Fast forward more than a century to a different world of medicine, one of magnets and monitors and cold blue light. Today we have a machine that does, in a sense, exactly what Mosso dreamed of. It is called functional magnetic resonance imaging, the fMRI scanner, and the principle at its very heart is Mosso's principle, almost unchanged. An fMRI does not photograph thoughts. What it actually detects is blood. When a region of your brain works harder, it demands more oxygenated blood. And the scanner maps that surge of flow, every glowing image of a brain lighting up that you have ever seen is underneath a map of moving blood. The exact thing Mosso was chasing with his wooden seesaw and his counterweights. Around the year 2013, a researcher named Stefano Sandrone and his colleagues went looking in those Italian archives, and they found Mosso's lost manuscripts. They read them, they translated them, and they realized what the scientific community had thrown away, that this nearly forgotten Italian had laid the conceptual foundation of modern brain imaging decades before anyone could build it. But they did something more. They asked the question that haunts every story like this one. Was he actually right? Did the balance really work? So a modern laboratory built one, a new version of Mosso's human circulation balance, fitted with sensors and recording equipment Mosso could only have dreamed of. They had volunteers lie down exactly as Mosso's subjects had. They balanced them, and then they gave their brains work to do, music to listen to, video to watch, and the balance tipped toward the head. A brain given something to do was measurably heavier than a brain at rest. More than a century after he died, in an experiment he never saw, Angelo Mosso was proven right. He had been correct all along. He had simply been correct in 1882, in a world that could not yet follow him. There is a lesson buried in this story, and it is not a comfortable one. We like to believe that science is a straight line, that good ideas are recognized, that the truth wins. But Mosso's balance tells us something else, that an idea can be completely right and still be discarded, simply because it arrives before the world is ready to test it. How many other Mossos are there? How many correct ideas are sitting right now in some archive, in some forgotten notebook, true and waiting and unread? The next time you concentrate, really concentrate, remember what is happening inside you. The silent surge of blood, the mind making its demand, and the body answering. Your thoughts have weight. A man proved it 140 years ago, and we are only just beginning to believe him. The body has always kept its secrets in plain sight. We just have to be ready to see them.